talking a lot about frames. Not all frames are created equal. They're blue chip frames. America is a free society. In a free society, hard work pays off and people get what they deserve. Those are meta frames. They kind of keep on giving. You got the frame and you can use it without really breaking into the principle to advance certain views of the world, certain social policies. When frames match up, when the policymaker, the president, the media, the activists are all reading from the same frame, things happen. When frames start to disintegrate, when counterframes come into play, actions that were possible as common sense interventions become less common sense. We had a frame. It was a social justice frame. It was a frame that linked up preachers and lawyers to sanitation workers and maids. It linked up people from the north, people from the south, whites, non-whites, people along a same frame. That is, that there was something deeply amiss about American society, that it was not natural, and that interventions to change these outcomes, disparities, discrimination, were not only not against the American value, but they were the quintessential embodiment of American values.
There are a lot of things that are counterintuitive. For example, one of the ways we talk about race is in terms of individuals and in terms of disparities. Both of those ways of talking about race decontextualized are problematic. Individual pulls us back into an individual frame. Disparities, if the group you're looking on is stigmatized, disparities actually drive public support away from the group. An example, black men are 8 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Latinos are much more likely to drop out of school than white. The way the mind processes that, if you have a negative attitude about Latinos, is Latinos are stupid. If you think that blacks are violent, when you say blacks are more likely to be incarcerated or arrested, it reinforces that negative stereotype. We have to become much more sophisticated about the frames the person is bringing to the conversation to know how to engage them. We don't know how to engage someone until we know what are the background frames they use to make sense of the world. What we're talking about is a transformation. We're not just talking about really distributing things in the way they are. Transformation for us really looks at the work our institutions do as well as our policies. You could say the bookends is really not to focus on conscious intentional racism, but to focus on structural and institutional work on one end and the unconscious bias on the other. And if we do that, we have a very different understanding of race, and we see race as a continuum that's constantly being reconfigured. But in that continuum, we also see incredible opportunities to sort of rethink race, talk about race in a transformative way, and do different kind of racial work.
I'm going to share with you some of the headlines from the research that we've done at the Opportunity Agenda, again drawing from research that's done by many folks, including our own. We looked at media coverage of equal opportunity, including affirmative action, to see what are the main themes, who's being quoted, what are the main narratives that are out there. When Kim and others talk about the frames that are out there, the media plays an important, not the only, but an important role in setting those frames, and we wanted to see what those were. So first we looked at what are the anti-affirmative action frames that are in the public discourse as reflected in national print media, national radio, primarily national public radio, and then regional and city-based daily newspapers. And we had an emphasis on the 5 states that at that time were facing challenges to equal opportunity policies. First thing we found is that the opponent's frame uses affirmative action as racial preferences. And that's not a surprise to you, but it's important to think about what preferences really means as a narrative. The notion of privilege, and they're tapping, as you'll see, they're tapping into an important belief system that many people have. The notion that affirmative action threatens the goal of a colorblind society. So everyone accepts that that is our goal, but affirmative action is very much depicted in the anti-affirmative action communications in these media outlets as a threat to that ideal. Affirmative action inappropriately elevates group rights over individual rights. This is a very important part of the narrative. Yeah, that's fine. We understand that groups need to move forward, but in America, we care about the rights of the individual, and affirmative action violates those rights. So what are the pro-affirmative action frames and messages that are there? This won't be a surprise to you because this is what all of us have been saying. Necessary to achieve diversity, needed to remedy past discrimination, and to achieve equal opportunity. But by contrast, the spokespeople on behalf of equal opportunity tend to be editorial boards, columnists, academics, university administrators, et cetera. That actually, I think, is positive for those of us who are advocates. I think we need to step up the visibility of advocates, but actually these spokespeople have much higher level of credibility than do advocates on either side. And I say that as somebody who is one of those advocates.